Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is Wednesday, and all of our guests today, including Brian Burke, standing by, brought to you by our title sponsor. So glad to have them aboard, Able Auctions, ableauctions.ca. Toronto versus Montreal tonight. It is the Professional Women's Hockey League Takeover Tour, and Brian Burke is going to join us now. He is the Executive Director of the PWHL Players Association. Brian, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you?
Good, Donnie. How are you?
Very, very good. Hey, what's your reaction to tonight's game getting sold out so quickly back in November?
Well, it's been a common reaction around the league. We started a year ago, just over a year ago. We started New Year's a year ago, and we started a month earlier this year. But almost all the neutral site games in Vancouver, Seattle was over 9,000, Detroit was 13,000. So we've had great crowd reaction all over the league. But Vancouver, that's pretty special.
What are people going to see tonight, Brian, who haven't checked out this league?
Well, if you haven't watched the PWHL, I think the number one thing that will strike you is the speed and skill level of the players. The women are amazing athletes, and they do a lot of amazing things with the puck and without the puck. They can shoot. They make great plays. They play a great brand of hockey, and they're also very physical. The number two thing people notice who have not followed the women's game in years is how physical it is. A great deal of physical contact is permitted.
Hey, Brian, expansion. Someone said they'd like to add a couple of teams here in the next little while. What about Vancouver? Although most of the teams are back east, Brian, would it make sense?
Well, expansion's a complex topic, obviously, because we only have 6 teams. If we had 2 teams, that's a massive industry growth. But that's something certainly the players want to look at. I worry a little bit about expanding too quickly, but it's not my call. I'm the head of the Players Association. The league is going to do what they want, with or without me. I don't have a vote. But if they do expand, I think they're putting 2 teams out west makes more sense than putting 1 back east and 1 out west. So if they're going to go that way, I would vote for 2 out west or 2 back east and then continue to grow the game. But I think that is coming. I think expansion is not on the horizon. I think it's right around the corner.
Brian, your thoughts on growth of women's hockey over the years? Canada's got a great program. The U.S. does as well. They seem to be always in the finals of tournaments. What about all the way around the world, the growth of women's hockey in your eyes?
Well, I think the PWHL is going to help. We've got 12, I think, Euros playing this year. I think it's going to help the growth of women's hockey across the planet. But the fact of the matter is the IHF has not funded women's sports properly, in my view, and they have not kept pace. So you're right. But what you mentioned is, if you look back the last 15 years, gold medal championship, world championship game, gold medal game, Canada-US, US-Canada, Canada-US, US-Canada, US-Canada, Canada-US. Same thing in the Olympics. And that's got to stop. We've got to break that cycle. That's going to come from more funding for the other countries around the world. But it's going to continue to grow with the PW. They now have a place to play. They have a place to go. It used to be, you got so far, they had a couple of pro leagues in Europe, but they weren't very well attended and didn't pay well. This league is different. So you're going to see more and more people gravitate toward this league and go back and play for their home countries in international competition. That's going to help too.
Brian, got to ask you a Canucks question. You made some of the biggest trades in the city over the years, the Sedins, Pavel Bure. A lot of talk about JT Miller and Elias Pettersson here. What would you do if you were the GM of the Canucks handling this situation?
Well, first off, let's get back to the PWHL before we move off that quickly. Nice try, guys. I'll answer the question, and let's talk some more PW for at least a couple minutes. I'm not sure that they need my advice. I had dinner with Jim Rutherford last night. He's such a smart man. I don't think I'd presume to offer him advice here. And Patrick Alvin worked for me in Pittsburgh. I was part of the team when he left us to go to Pittsburgh. He's a great guy. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't need my advice. If I were to say, if Patrick asked me, I'd say, take your time here. The fact that 2 players don't get along, that's not new. That's not news, by the way. It's only news in Vancouver because of the marketplace here. It's not big news anywhere else. Like, there are players, we won a Calder Cup when I played in Maine. There were players on that team I barely spoke to. Never had dinner with once all year. To talk about playing PlayStation with guys, how about saying hello to a guy as he gets on the bus? That's as civil as it gets some places. So it's not that big a deal. And competitive guys exacerbate the problem. JT Miller's a competitive guy. His competitive juices are going to exacerbate those type of situations and amplify them.
Do all PWHL players get along, Brian? Teammates?
No, they don't. But I'm not privy to. I'm not that close to that many of the players. I know the key players on all the teams. I've got to know a bunch more through this job, but I don't know as many as I'd like to.
As an executive, did you ever, I don't know if you want to name names, whatever the case may be, did you ever have to deal with a couple of your players who didn't get along and it was affecting the team in a negative way?
So we got one PW question, and then we're right back to the Canucks. I figured this. This is a really sleazy way to get an interview, Downey, but okay. Yes, I had players that didn't get along. I'm not going to name them. My next book will, but I'm not going to name them. I had players that didn't speak. I had players who offered to fight each other, came to see me and said, if you don't trade this guy, I'm going to beat the snot out of him. So, yes, I've had that. It's not new. Guys, players not getting along, that goes back to the very first teams founded in biblical times. Guys that raced together or wrestled or whatever. Mm-hmm. There were teammates that didn't like each other going back centuries. It's not news, and it's not new.
Gladiators often didn't get along back in the day in the Coliseum, Brian. Okay, so now I'm feeling pressure to come up with a PWHL question, but let me phrase it this way: hockey in the States, women, men, whatever the case may be. We just saw the Americans win their second straight World Junior Championship, and they're favored going into the Four Nations face-off. Brian, you grew up in the States. What can you tell us about the growth of hockey in the U.S., and did you see this coming going way back when?
Well, I'm not gonna say that's the reason that Canada didn't win. I thought Canada was going to win that game. When it was 3-3, and they were dancing around with the puck, I thought they were going to win that game. And all the criticism of Dave Cameron since then, it doesn't make sense to me. But the overall pattern, and I told you this, Donnie, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Start with the Gretzky trade, and then you got the Miracle on Ice going back, Squaw Valley going back even farther. But the relocation of teams to southern climates, so L.A., Gretzky gets traded to L.A., huge impact. Minnesota moves to Dallas. You had Tampa. You had Miami or Florida now. And that's all been migration toward non-traditional hockey markets. There are more people in California than there are in Canada. Mm-hmm. So this improvement of hockey should have taken place over time, and it's been accelerated by the growth of minor league hockey, the American development model, which I think has accelerated development of players. All these things have led to an explosion of growth and a high concentration of high-skill guys at the NHL level in America. So it's not a surprise to me. But this hand-wringing and moaning and groaning and whining that's going on is excessive in my mind. They still have a great team.
Should Canada be worried about its development, Brian, or are there things Canada is doing wrong? Because people up here, they go on and on about what the Americans are doing, and that maybe the Canadians should do the same thing.
Well, first off, like I say, I go back and say it's the first time the U.S. have won consecutive gold medals in their history. So it's not like this World Junior domination like Canada had for 10 years. And so to me, it's like, let's wait and see. Let's take a deep breath here, folks. Canada's still really good at this. We used to copy almost everything they did. The break came a couple years back when they said, we're going to do the American development model. So instead of players, so if you take a Pee Wee team, this happened when I was coaching my son in Pee Wee when I was in Hartford, so 92, 93. I coached, and they sent me the ice schedule. They said, you got a full ice practice on Wednesday and another one on Friday. I called the coach of the other team. I said, why don't we split the ice and do 2 practices? We'll get 4 ice times instead of 2. He said, oh no, I need the whole ice to have a good practice. I said, let me show you a practice on half ice and we'll see. And we did that all year after that. So the notion of putting more skaters on the ice and using, if you have 20 players and they get an hour of ice time, that's a waste of good ice time on practice days. You can do a great practice on a smaller sheet. That's what the American development model is built upon. Put 40 players on the ice instead of 20, or put 50 players on the ice. Do small area work on skill development, and it's been a great success. The second thing that I think Canadians are wringing their hands about right now is the American development, or the National Team Development Plan, which the teams that all show up in Plymouth or Ann Arbor now. Sorry, they moved. I think that's been a real magnet for development players, but that's kept hockey alive and vibrant all across Canada instead of taking the 20 best players and putting them in one place. So I think the current model works just fine. We're just maybe in a slump right now.
Hey, Brian, you know how ownership is so important in all leagues, all sports. All the clubs in the PWHL are owned by billionaire Mark Walter, the big owner of the LA Dodgers. How good is it to know you got the league has got good stability ownership?
Thank you for a PW question, Dolly. Appreciate that. That's what I thought the point of this interview was, so thank you very much. The owners, it's actually the Walter family. It's Mark and Kimber Walters, and they're huge fans of women's hockey. Kimber Walter, they billeted families that played in Boston, pro hockey in Boston. They billeted with the Walter family. They've been fans and supporters for more than a decade, going back to Julie Chu playing there. So they've been great fans and great supporters. Miss Billie Jean King is also an owner with her partner, Alana Kloss. So the ownership is stable. It's massive dollars. They've done a great job so far. And I think the model of one team being owned, all 6 teams being owned by one owner, that's not unique. That's happened in a couple other sports. I think it makes sense for us coming out of the gate.
You miss Vancouver, Brian?
I loved living here. You guys know that. I worked here twice. I worked for PAP the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Team got better. Crowds built up. Worked the second time. Teams got better. Crowds built up. I loved it here. I was so sad when I got fired.
A lot of people were. Brian, thanks for this. We appreciate it. Sorry, you're going to say
Thank
something
you.
there. You're going to say something there, I think.
No.
No? Okay. Well, we'll get you next time. Brian, thanks for this. All the
Thanks,
best.
guys.
You bet.